So for day 8, I'm feeling a little under the weather, but we're going to do a run through of day 8 so far. We're going to go through a People article, which pretty much compiles all the text message buzz that's going on. And we're going to take a look at Dani's thread. She is back in the courtroom today, and she's already done some live reporting. But we're gonna start with this People article here because if you're clicking this video, you've probably already seen the headlines that Jonathan Majors appears to admit physically attacking ex Grace Jabbari in text messages entered into evidence. Now, this is Emily Palmer, and as we're getting started, I want you to see that this is 1:09 p.m. Eastern, and I want to go right to this section down here. In text messages between Jonathan Majors and accuser Grace Jabbari, the Marvel actor appears to admit physical violence against his now ex, 6 months before Majors was arrested in March and charged with assault in a separate domestic violence case. And actually, I'm going to jump over to Milagro because they posted without the narration in the middle. I fear you have no perspective of what could happen if you go to the hospital. They will ask you questions, and as I don't think you actually protect us, it could lead to investigation even if you do lie, and they suspect something. And then Jabbari says, I will tell the doctor I bumped my head if I go. I'm going to give it one more day, but I can't sleep, and I need some stronger painkillers. That's all. Why would I tell them what really happened when it's clear I want to be with you? And then Jabbari actually started crying while she was reading these aloud in court today. So Kelly Galloway finished for her and read the I will tell the doctor I bumped my head if I go. I'm going to give it one more day, but I can't sleep and need some stronger painkillers. That's all. If you're reading these at their face value in a bubble, you're going to think that she can't sleep and she needs stronger painkillers because something happened to her head. She has some type of injury that Majors is supposedly telling her not to go get treatment for. But she told us she regularly takes sleeping pills. Knowing that context, that she regularly takes sleeping pills, sleeping tablets, it seems like without those, she ordinarily can't sleep. That this isn't something that we can necessarily just attach to the other text message that it was brought in with. And I need some stronger painkillers. That can sound really bad, especially if you're like the type of person that like doesn't even like to take Tylenol, and that one day you're like, oh, you go to someone that you're like a roommate or someone you live with, and you're like, my head is really killing me. Do you have any Tylenol? And the person will look at you and be like, you taking Tylenol? You never take anything. You know, you could read something like this and be like, oh, wow, it must be bad if someone is saying that they need stronger painkillers. But it could also, depending on the person, not be significant, or not, at least it could be mutually exclusive from what this is being attached to here. If there was a fight, because this is happening, this is September 2022. That was the same time frame that was given for the headphone pub friend, where the drunk pub friend came home to the London property, and then the Coretta Scott King recording. Those three things were all part of like one fight that kept going on. It didn't end when it ended. It went on for 2 or 3 days. And it's possible that whole duration of fighting is exhausting you and draining you. So, the text messages, which were previously mentioned by the prosecutor's 115-page pretrial filing in October, are considered Molineux evidence, which the New York State Unified Court System defines as conduct that is inextricably interwoven with the charged acts, and which may provide necessary background information or explanation to the charged acts. In that filing, prosecutors mentioned medical records from London related to an incident that occurred in September 2022. That earlier incident of alleged abuse had previously been ruled inadmissible, but in a series of cross-examination questions, which presiding judge Michael Gaffey had said lacked specificity, the defense opened the door to prosecutors being able to share with the jury text messages regarding that prior incident. So on cross-examination earlier this week, Priya Chaudhry, one of Major's defense attorneys, had drilled Jabbari about why the morning after the alleged March 2023 incident, the woman had told emergency personnel that she did not remember how she became injured. Gaffey said Friday morning that Chaudhry had asked the questions in an effort to impugn Jabbari's credibility, even though they knew there might be another reason she was not forthcoming. In those September 2022 text messages, Majors had responded to Jabbari, threatening suicide if his then-girlfriend went to the hospital for her injured head. Last night, I considered killing myself versus coming home, Majors wrote to Jabbari, adding, I need love, too. Or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man, I don't deserve it, and I should just kill myself. In this way, my existence is miserable. I want to die. And Jabbari replied, I will not go to the doctor if you don't feel safe with me doing so, or don't trust me to. I promise you I would never mention you, but understand your fear. And then we don't actually see the text messages here. We just get a narrative. So telling her that she could not reject his love and admonishing her for not hugging her after the alleged fight, Majors noted by text, I will probably kill myself. It's not really contemplating anymore, he said. I'm a monster, a horrible man, not capable of love. I'm killing myself soon. Jonathan, you can't say this. I'm going to have to tell someone, Jabbari responded by text, noting her perceived error in not hugging him. As the text messages were read aloud to the jury, Majors was seated at the defense table in a black suit, white-collared shirt, kept his head down, hands in his lap, his binder of notes shut. When the prosecutor finished reading the messages, the actor looked briefly at the jury. The details of that September 2022 incident were not further detailed for the jury, as that earlier incident is still otherwise precluded from coming into trial. However, in a 115-page filing reviewed by People, prosecutors listed a series of texts by Jabbari in September 2022. Now, as I read this, it seems a little confusing, but I think this part here, where it says, as shared with the jury on Friday, September 22, 2022, a text with JM, and then medical treatment, I think this might be referring to the one set of messages back and forth, and then this might be referring to the other set of back and forth that we just read a few seconds ago. But these other things that are mentioned just seem to be part of this series of texts in this 115-page filing. But People notes that they include, photographs of a hand, shoulder, and buttock, one, along with text about, quote, punching, quote, discussing pain, and as shared with the jury Friday, whatever they're referring to is text with JM and medical treatment. In court Friday, Galloway then moved on in her redirect, questioning of Jabbari to the March 2023 incident, asking Jabbari why she initially told emergency personnel that she did not know how she had become injured. I was just scared of the consequences of it, Jabbari answered. I still wanted to protect him. Ms. Jabbari, Galloway asked her, do you know who caused your injuries on March 25th, 2023? I do, Jabbari said, adding, the defendant Jonathan Majors. And then that's just the context there. Now, my general take here is, of course, these text messages don't look good. So actually, in this quote, it leaves out the it's fake part. And People are separating it from the rest of the quote. So this it's fake part, it's just fake. It keeps being distanced by some of the reporting. And yeah, it's not clear what he's calling fake, but if the issue at hand, if you're inferring that the text message is referring to an injury to her head, and then it's just fake, why couldn't you also question, or at least think maybe, that it's just fake is referring to the injury to her head? Hear me out. So on one hand, this part here, I will tell the doctor I bumped my head if I go. If we read that as her saying that's not what happened, that she didn't bump her head, then that's why we should also read something like this, as if it's just a victim protecting their abuser. Told them it was my fault for trying to grab your phone. But we know she grabbed his phone. We know she said that's why the physical fight started. And this part here either led to the injuries during a scuffle, depending on what you make of the surveillance footage for the rest of the night and how you think she should or should not be able to use her hands, how you weigh her 3 different interpretations of when she became aware that she had an ear injury. But there's 2 ways you can go. If you want to play the game of read language like this and assume that that person was abused by their partner and making up an excuse to cover for it, then you'd also need to read, I told them it was my fault for trying to grab your phone, as a lie and an excuse. But we know she grabbed his phone. And then the second part here is, but I can't sleep and I need some stronger painkillers. Now that would be significant if you normally had no sleeping problems and if you normally didn't rely on things to deal with pain and hurt. But we know you went the lengths of going to get a drink, sneaking a drink at the restaurant on March 24th. And we know, according to you, because you volunteered it, you regularly take sleeping tablets. And if you weren't regularly taking sleeping tablets, you probably would have trouble sleeping. It's crazy that this line is separated. It's just fake. It's crazy that that's detached from the rest of it. But that's all. Why would I tell them what really happened when it's clear I want to be with you? What is when it's clear? We're not seeing the context there. When it's clear I want to be with you. How is something clear? What occurred recently that Jonathan, this shouldn't even have to be stated. It's clear. Because statements like this could mean I did something, or I said something, or I feel something, and I deserve the desired response back. And I'm interested to know on this middle text that isn't actually quoted, it's just narrated. But this last night I considered killing myself versus coming home. I need love too, or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man, I don't deserve it, and I should just kill myself. In this way, my existence is miserable, I want to die. And this part's interesting to me because they're framing it as threatening suicide if his then girlfriend went to the hospital for her injured head. But it doesn't actually say that. He is threatening suicide, but they're like inserting this part here. And then they say that it's because of rejecting love and a hug after a fight. So how are they making this conclusion here, threatening suicide if his then girlfriend went to the hospital for her injured head? Am I missing it? You want to read it again? Last night I considered killing myself versus coming home, Majors wrote to Jabbari, adding, I need love too. Or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man I don't deserve it, and I should just kill myself. In this way, my existence is miserable. I want to die. She volunteered. She turned this around. I won't go to the hospital if you don't feel safe with me doing so, or don't trust me to. I promise you, I would never mention you, but I understand your fear. Then it cuts to telling her that she could not reject his love and admonishing for her by not hugging him after the alleged fight. So this is detached. This is detached. Majors noted by text. I will probably kill myself. It's not really contemplating anymore, he said. I'm a monster, a horrible man, not capable of love. I'm killing myself soon. And yeah, he's calling himself a monster, so maybe you can interpret or infer that that's where that comes from. But he's also saying, I need love too. So the way this is pieced together leaves a lot of questions for me, because I do not read this as a conclusive, he responded threatening suicide if his then girlfriend goes to the hospital. She's the one that mentions it in this conversation, and then it cycles back to a rejection of love. And if that's the case, if we focus on this, I need love too. Maybe I don't deserve it, and in this way my existence is miserable. I need love too, but it's clear I want to be with you. Now that seems like maybe the fight was about, hey, it doesn't seem like you love me. And she just goes, well, yeah, I do. And he may have said something like, well, this behavior doesn't feel very loving. And she was like, well, I just want to be with you. And then they argue about that change that one person wants and the other person doesn't want to make. Like, I don't know. My conclusion is this does not look healthy. It absolutely does not look healthy. Not as an individual and not for a relationship. And I don't think someone should be responsible for their partner being in a state like this. And I think her suggestion, and I wonder if she did, where she says, you can't say this, I'm going to have to tell someone. I think that's appropriate. And it's interesting that she is saying that here when right now, like these text messages were used today as part of redirect to establish that final line from Galloway. But, I was just scared of the consequences of it. That's why you didn't speak to others. You didn't talk about this before. But, Jonathan, you can't say this. I'm going to have to tell someone. And hold on. So this says here, Jabbari responded by text, noting her perceived error in not hugging him. Hey, Brown Sugar, thanks for subscribing. So where is she noting her perceived error in not hugging him? That's a lot. All right, so now I see that Cheyenne RoundTree actually says these text messages are about the September 2023 Headphone-Coretta Scott King and Pub Friend incident, which spread across more than one day. Now, if you'd seen me post on X earlier, you'll see some of my thoughts about speculating that that was the case. The other articles I read, like People magazine, they say the details of that September 2022 incident were not further detailed for the jury, as that earlier incident is still otherwise precluded from coming into the trial. But let's go through this. Jonathan Majors discouraged his ex from visiting hospital. They will ask you questions, and you know who wrote it. So let's get clear on this. So, during redirect questioning on Friday, prosecutors asked Jabbari if Majors had ever attempted to stop her from going to the hospital to receive treatment for injuries, and she answered yes. Prosecutors then displayed the jury a text message conversation between the couple, discussing an incident where Jabbari apparently hurt her head, and Majors said it was just fake, and expressed that he didn't want her to go to the hospital. The messages correspond to Jabbari's earlier testimony about a prolonged incident in September 2022, which was tied to Majors becoming upset that Jabbari had gone to a pub with a friend in London. Majors allegedly confronted Jabbari, stomped on her earphones, and told her she was stupid if she didn't know what she had done, Jabbari testified. Majors then allegedly attempted to kick Jabbari out of the house they shared, running up the stairs to throw her belongings in bags and in the trash, as well as hurling and breaking objects in close proximity to Jabbari. In the continued aftermath of the fight, Majors was heard on a voice recording yelling, "How dare you," at Jabbari, and saying he was a great man and he needed a great woman, adding that he expected Jabbari to hold herself to the standards of Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King. In the aftermath, Majors allegedly threatened Jabbari that he was going to consider killing himself in response to her discussing going to the hospital, according to messages shown in court. "I need love too," he wrote, and this is where the suicide threats follow. There's no preceding context that he says, "I'm gonna kill myself if you go to the hospital." She, hears this and then starts talking about going to the doctor. "I need love too," he wrote. "Or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man, I don't deserve it, and I should just kill myself. In this way, my existence is miserable, I want to die." So when all the other outlets were just presenting this as some random thing, because the news didn't seem to report it to us, except this article now, that this message is about an incident that we heard her testify to, it's going to seem like another instance of something. Because remember, she said that September 2022 is the monster thing and the controlling and the suicide threat. Thank you, DJ T-Mac. The fight and message reflect a specific event that led to a police report being filed in London, according to an evidence list prosecutors noted in an October court filing. The DA said it had obtained voice recordings, photos, and texts containing references to punching, physical pain, and medical treatment, all from September 2022. Last month, London's Metropolitan Police confirmed to Rolling Stone that there's an ongoing investigation into a September 2022 assault that included allegations of physical assaults. Okay, so Cheyenne says, and Cheyenne was sitting in the courtroom yesterday. Jimmy told us that. He was sitting right behind her. That Chaudhry went point by point through the aftermath of the alleged attack, having Jabbari repeatedly demonstrate where she believed Majors had twisted her arm and where she had felt pain on her body. Now, this is a long paragraph. I thought she was going to go in and give some details. She goes, "No, according to prosecutors and Jabbari, Majors just wanted to make his girlfriend feel pain." They don't cover any of it. Then they mention Chaudhry going point for point for all the ways that Jabbari was using injured hand, and Cheyenne cuts in. Jabbari, who already pointed to her experience as a professional dancer and once dancing with a broken rib, told the court she tried not to focus on the pain she was feeling. It is unclear if the testimonies Rolling Stone gathered will make their way to trial. All right, it's time for us to go over to Dani's coverage because I wanted to see how the Messenger was reporting everything going on today so far. And this is the part we have about Holly Blakely. Jabbari's friend Holly Blakely, a British choreographer, has now taken the witness stand as well. She testified Friday that she got a call the morning of the incident on March 25th. Jabbari sounded like I'd never heard her before. Quite quiet, quite wrecked, sounding like she was in shock, Blakey testified. Let's go look at Dani's coverage. All right, so Grace Jabbari's final moments on Redirect was more of the same old razzle-dazzle thrown in to insinuate that she didn't understand legalese and documents she signed, despite her parents and her sisters being attorneys. Also insinuating earlier DV in 9/2022 by way of redacted text messages. Grace Jabbari also upgraded the claims of how she was pushed into the vehicle to, "He picked me up, threw me against the car," because apparently we can't see what the videos actually depict. Prosecution witness Holly Blakey, very soft-spoken and hesitant, gives off reluctant witness. 36, choreographer and mother of 2 under the age of 5, met Grace in 2015, worked together very closely, both professionally and personally. Holly Blakey met Jonathan Majors 2.5 years ago and describes him as a very sweet, charming person. Says he and Grace Jabbari were very in love, finishing each other's sentences, very excited. When asked about whether or not Jabbari stopped hanging out, Holly could not answer, and said that they have a separate friendship than Jabbari's usual friend group. That's interesting. And that she always saw Grace. Only that, quote, she would be in the house more, working a lot less. Yeah, it does. So, earlier she said that Grace saw her friends less, and yet now she could not answer that and said she always saw Grace. That sounds like another contradiction. The March 25th WhatsApp calls occurred midday London time. First message was 12 noon UK time. Flagged to her that something wasn't right once she did the time conversion. Was on and off the phone to Gracie for hours and hours, multiple hours. Never observed Gracie like that before, crying and very upset. There were a lot of hours of being on the phone. Holly says she spoke to her constantly with gaps of 20 to 30 minutes over 4 to 5 hours. Well, I understand why you capitalized constantly there. Never came a time when Grace stopped responding to texts and calls, went from extremely crying to not extremely crying, had a bit more get up and go. Defense objection was sustained, but not before we all hear her say, "It took me a very long time to persuade her to leave." But I thought she had a plan to move when she went back to the house. Didn't she have a plan to move back when she went to the house? Did someone already call that out? So, cross-examination. That means Major's team, the defense, is getting to question Holly Blakey. So, Holly confirms that the DA paid for her flights, hotel, per diem meals, and expenses. And Holly confirms awareness of Grace's drinking. Now, she had spoken to the DA on 6/16/2023, and now she's trying to confirm with some attempt at explaining that she told the DA on 6/16 that Grace was, quote, not making much sense, was half asleep at times, was hysterical, didn't know exactly how it happened, that Jabbari said she was really scrappy with Jonathan. And then on redirect, Holly says, this is with the prosecution again, meant her conversation was nonlinear. Didn't always have a structure a normal conversation would have, and it was all over the place. And that was no further questions after that. The driver will be testifying on Monday, and Officer Swayne's testimony pointed to sloppy police work. I don't want to just say something and have it just sow the only seed. I encourage open thinking. Um, I think we don't have context for those text messages. We clearly got a couple of them coming in, more than a couple. We have a few of them coming in, but the rest were deemed inadmissible or irrelevant. And in the way that they're being reported, it's like they can't even make a relevant connection from one text to the next without having to narrate it. Now, it seems like there was clearly a fight going on and the dynamic was pretty poor. And I would like to know if Jabbari actually did try to get help for Jonathan Majors. And I'm curious how he responded to that message. I'm curious how this, Jonathan, you can't say that, I'm going to have to tell someone, was the end of what they were able to read. I felt my rundown on the text pretty quickly. Yeah, I think that they can hurt the case in a certain way. I mean, first and foremost, the point of being able to introduce those texts the way that they came in was because the judge felt that Priya tried to impugn the credibility of Grace Jabbari, and the small scope of text messages that was able to come in was supposed to go to the credibility of something else Grace Jabbari was saying, mainly that her reasoning for not knowing, saying she didn't know how she got her injuries, could have been explained by a desire to protect Jonathan Majors. The text certainly can be interpreted as making that claim more credible, and the jury has the right to decide that. But it's not the only evidence. They're supposed to consider the evidence as a whole, and I think, especially if they follow the idea that they're supposed to talk about March 25th, that doesn't really impact that much for March 25th. Because Jonathan being suicidal, and there's apparently a bump on the head and this part about it being fake, and there was no context given to it being fake, I don't think that does anything to change the video footage. The chase, Jabbari saying she hit Jonathan, Jabbari pulling at him and ripping his coat, Jabbari being fine using her hand in multiple ways for hours after. And if we look deeper into it, I think it's hard to take these texts at face value. And I don't expect anyone that hasn't followed this case to know about any inconsistencies or why I would say what I'm about to say, but Jabbari has given inconsistent explanations on a bunch of who, what, when, how, why, where am I's for just March 25th. And all of those questions were hours after Majors separated from her. So that confusion emerged during a time period where he wasn't even present. He wasn't with her physically. And then if you add into the mix the do for you language that she sends to Jonathan Majors, she texts him while she's in the hospital, but she's telling police and medical staff in the hospital something different. Now you kind of gotta wonder if she's saying in those text messages, I'll tell them it started because I started the fight over the phone, and we know she actually did start the fight over the phone, and she said she started the fight, then what does it mean when she says, I'll tell them I bumped my head? Because the last time we see her saying she's going to tell someone something, it was actually something she actually did. And we've also seen that she implies that Jonathan did something when she doesn't know what's going on. She can try to explain this away. She can try to explain this away and say she was saying she didn't know just to protect him, but in this situation she can't, because then she's clearly not protecting him here. So that's something that someone needs to make sense. Someone needs to make sense of that part for me to just take those other text messages at face value. And again, remember, redirect ended today with a very determined, I know who attacked me, Jonathan Majors. And the reason I didn't tell anyone was because I was afraid to. But continuing on, we had testimony yesterday. Do you ask in front of the cops, did he hurt me? Yeah, she asks that. Then you ask, what happened to my ear? Is that what you said? But you know that we already have 3 different inconsistencies where she's telling us she already knew what happened to her ear before she passes out in the closet. 2. Third is this one. This is the third. Did you tell them you didn't know how your finger got hurt? I don't recall. They play the video again because it's on audio, and then she confirms it. And it's just, these examples here, you can't tell me that it's her trying to protect Jonathan, because she elicits Jonathan. She tries to tie Jonathan in it. She tries to suddenly pretend she doesn't know what happened to her ear. She tries to vocalize that in front of the police officers. But she testified on direct and on cross 2 different explanations of, I realized something was wrong with my ear and that this must have happened and I was pulling hair out of it. So with that being said, I'm going to sign off. If I see someone's going live to talk about the rest of the afternoon, I'll definitely tweet a link and also post a link on X. Also try to share a community post here on YouTube. That way you guys can tune in and You guys have a good one, though. Have a good weekend. Take care.